the rise of artificial intelligence lead to the downfall of democracy as we know it? And frankly, is that necessarily a bad thing? Yeah, let's talk about that.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show.
Well, hey there, folks. Brian Nichols here on the Brian Nichols Show, and thank you for joining us on, of course, another fun-filled episode. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you from our Cardio Miracle Studios here in lovely Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is powered by our friends over at AMP America. If you want to go ahead, get the news that really matters without all the extra fluff, plus some, dare I say, pretty darn good opinion pieces and more, namely because I write some of them. Head over to ampamerica.com and join the AMP America team. I'm very excited to be powered by AMP America and to be part of the AMP America family. One more time, ampamerica.com. Also, the Brian Nichols Show, personally, by the way, is powered by our amazing studio sponsor, and that is the amazing folks over at Cardio Miracle. Now, I've been using Cardio Miracle personally for about a year, and I gotta tell you, folks, my life has literally changed for the better in this past year of using Cardio Miracle. And here's what I've experienced firsthand: better sleep, better pump at the gym, and this is probably the best thing for me, being a brand new dad and really paying attention to my health, is my blood pressure has plummeted, and that's fantastic because I had a family history of high blood pressure. I was nervous about having to take, multiple medications, what seemed like forever, because I was told, hey, you got that history of high blood pressure in your family. Not sure there's much we can do. You have a good diet. You're exercising 6 days a week. Let's throw some pills at it. No, I didn't want to do that. And I ended up finding Cardio Miracle, started using Cardio Miracle, and I watched my blood pressure plummet. My doctor said, what are you doing different? And I said, just having some Cardio Miracle twice a day, morning and night. So that's my personal story. And I know that you will experience something in the world of a positive benefit like yours truly, because I'm not just one story. I am one of tens of thousands of other folks out there who are experiencing the Cardio Miracle difference for themselves. So folks, if you want to jump on board and see the difference for yourself, head down below in the show notes, or if you're watching the video version of the show, head to the description, click the link. Going to bring you over to our friends at Cardio Miracle. Use code TBNS. It's going to save you 15% off your order. And by the way, you have nothing to lose because there's a 100% money back guarantee. So again, join the tens of thousands of other folks who are experiencing the Cardio Miracle difference for themselves. I guarantee your heart will thank you one more time. CardioMiracle.com, the best heart health supplement in the world. All right, folks, your heart is going to be very healthy and it's very strong. You take Cardio Miracle, but what about our democracy? How about that for a segue? We've been doing this for a while. Hopefully that worked. But no, let's talk about democracy. And namely, right now we're looking at the genesis of AI. AI really hit the market back in the beginning of 2022. And fast forward to where we are today, halfway through 2024. And wow, AI has really blown up. And we've been discussing the advent of AI and how it's going to change the way not only we live our lives, but also the way we govern ourselves. And to discuss that, and frankly, what's the impact, not just of AI when it comes to how we live our lives, but also how we vote, how we govern, how we work together as a community. What's it going to do there? To help me discuss all that and more, returning to the show, the AI wizard himself, Joe Gulesserian from the Practical book on NBA. Welcome back here to the Brian Nichols Show. Joe, how you doing?
Brian, I'm doing fine, and thank you very much for having me again.
Oh, absolutely, Joe. It's great to have you back on the show. You've been a regular here on the show for the past couple of years, and the audience loves when you come on the show because we always talk about something that is, frankly, like it's right around the corner, and then there it is, and that is the just continuing advancement of AI. We talked last time about AI being used by ministers of propaganda. We talked about going all the way back to the advent of, well, not necessarily the advent, but at least the more traditional use of propaganda, going back to Woodrow Wilson back in the beginning of the 19th century, 20th century, and then going forward to where we are today with folks like Joe Biden and his ministry of truth that was thankfully shut down? Question mark. Is it still there in the back end? We're not sure, but we discussed a lot of that fun stuff, Joe. But before we go into more AI stuff for today, do the audience a favor who maybe they haven't heard you here on the show, because peek behind the curtain, Joe. Since you were last in the show, we joined AMP America, and our audience has been blowing up, like literally tens of thousands of new folks listening. So who is Joe Gulesserian? Why do you care so much about AI, and how is this going to impact our world as we're moving forward?
Okay, so I'll talk about myself for about 15 seconds. Who I am is I wrote the practical book. It's called The Practical MBA on Economics, and that came out in 2022. I'm currently writing another book called The Guerrilla Guide for Entrepreneurs. I pretty well worked as an entrepreneur for the last 30 years, did about a 2.5-3-year stint as a professor in management studies. And I've done everything you could ever think of under the sun. I have an extensive sales background as well, a little bit of a technical background. And maybe I shouldn't have dropped out of engineering school, but I did. But so that's the short and long of it. I have an incredible, insatiable curiosity about the human condition and where we're going, and this whole concept of collective misguidance and the implications of AI in our society. So yeah, there you go.
Awesome, Joe. Well, let's dig into AI, because this is a conversation you and I have been having, and I know a lot of the folks in the audience have been having. Yes. And we're seeing AI go from being a really cool chat bot where you can make it create a bunch of, really funny articles or songs, to now it's in our daily lives. We're seeing AI creep from what was cool and magical thinking to now we are seeing it in our day-to-day lives. You're seeing it become part of your normal operating systems. You're seeing it in your browsers. You're seeing it on your phones. So, Joe, AI is definitely, it's less creeping and more sprinting into pretty much every facet of our lives. And it's going to change the way that not just we interact as a society, but also how we govern ourselves. And I mean, going back to the way that it's changing, heck, the business world, right? Like my day job, I'm in the world of contact center solutions, and we're seeing right now AI really help with some of that low skill entry level stuff that low level contact center agents were dealing with. So you're calling into your bank and you're trying to figure out your account balance and maybe set up a new checking account. I don't know, whatever it may be. You're calling into that bank, and instead of waiting on hold for 10, 15, 30 minutes for somebody to pick up the phone, you can talk to an AI chat bot, an intelligent voice agent, and have a somewhat intelligent conversation where you can get that basic stuff done without having to go into the nitty gritty of having a real live person on the phone. So we're seeing the change there. Now, on the flip side, what does that mean for some of those low skill agents? It means they're not going to have a job. And I guess that's where we're going to start the conversation today, Joe. We're seeing now the very real impacts of AI. You're seeing the $15 minimum wage, $20 minimum wage across the United States. Right now, we're looking at California. They just put that $20 minimum wage in place for fast food workers. Joe, I'm just seeing the writing on the wall from what I'm seeing in my own industry. I mean, these low skill workers, they are inevitably going to be replaced, if not already being replaced, by self-service kiosks, which when they add AI is going to make it way more efficient, way more deadly in terms of being accurate and really replacing people. So what's kind of your perspective in seeing AI changing the way that we do business, and frankly, where a lot of low skill, maybe entry level employees are now facing a really big uphill battle, because to get that first job, it's not I'm competing against another person, and now I'm competing against a chatbot or an AI robot. So where are we right now with the whole AI going into the workplace?
Well, the low skill is the easy part to catch. In terms of what you said, Brian, in respect to your call centers, a lot of that's gone overseas as it is. And then when it gets really difficult, they bring it back to the US or Canada or, Europe. So that's gone. That's the easy part. Your checkout cashiers, there's about 16 million people employed in something to do with retail in that area there, cashiers and so forth. They're going to be under the gun, but that's the beginning part. Where it's going to get very, very interesting is let's just talk about a law firm, okay? And a law firm usually has junior attorneys. So these are some of the areas where AI will touch, and I can give you some numbers later because I've done some research. And what will happen is that in the old days, you got your junior lawyer, you pay them, they just came out of law school, you pay them $25, $30 an hour, what have you. You bill them out at $250, and they'll probably put 100, 110 hours of billings or sometimes 70 hours of billings into a particular legal case. So what you can do is you can plug the case, via PDF, ask AI to file a defense or vice versa, or file a prosecution, if you will, or if you're going to be a plaintiff. You'll probably do it in 2 minutes. Then you get a lawyer to massage and clean it up. That might take an hour. So a lot of these junior entry positions in law will be at peril. What will happen is the complexities of, and I know programmers, and I hang with them a little bit. They're going, oh no, it can't do what we can, but this is just the beginning stage. It's going to take lower to medium programming jobs. If you did a master's in mathematics, I'll give you an example. You can go right now and say, I'm having trouble with calculus and I'm in first year university. And can you please teach me at a very slow pace integral calculus so I can understand it? So really at a slow pace. I wish I had that.
So really quick, Joe, I just want to point out something that you're identifying here, and that is, it's not just the low skill workers. It is in fact going to be some of these, I guess you'd classify them as like your white collar entry level jobs where, to your point, somebody probably went and spent tens of thousands of dollars, heck, hundreds of thousands of dollars if they're going up for their graduate or doctor's degrees. And now those entry level jobs more or less are just being completely, not just even replaced, just like made irrelevant by the advent of AI.
Yes. And if we're still thinking, chatbot GPT, that's fine. I'll give you an example quickly in the higher professions like law, accounting, the sciences. So you can take you can do a whole list of all your journal entries, if you will, and I used to teach this stuff in college, and you can put your journal entries together and say create a balance sheet and financial incomes. It'll just map it out for you, and then you can massage it, clean it up a little bit. I'm going to give you another example where really will hit hard. I'm not saying all, but part. My prediction is I go along with 30 to 40% unemployment it will cause it. And I'll go into the dystopian society that could bring on in a bit. But consider there's 165 million, theoretically, job market in the United States. 16 million of those people are drivers, from Uber to trucking to you name it. Light transport, on and on and on. So when AI takes a lot of that over, it's going to eventually be safer than what we can do. Of course, the people who don't want that to happen, first accident that happens, they'll probably smear AI for that. But it's going to take a lot of driving jobs away. If you go to an airport, go to Atlanta Airport, and there's no one driving the train. It does it automatically, and it's proficient. Yeah. I know you have a question. I can tell.
My question is, Joe, I've heard, this job is going away. We're going to lose a lot of jobs here. This job is no longer relevant. So it sounds like there's going to be a lot of people, dare I say, in maybe the millions of folks who all of a sudden, within a few short years, maybe short months, depending on how quickly this technology advances, they're going to find themselves out of a job. So what's the option for those folks who are, they're kind of facing uncertainty right now? Like, what do we do? Do we just, hope that we get, I don't know, like a different job? Do we start going and doing some skills training, or is there something like a UBI from a government standpoint that people are going to start pointing to?
Well, we're going to get to UBI. You just teased me on that one there, but there's one thing here that and I'm going to build up to UBI and answer your question. There's 21% in the US, and it's the same story in Europe and Canada, have some type of government dependency in the United States, okay? That could be anywhere from Medicare, welfare, nutritional supplements. So I'm not judging that. There's in the United States, it's worse in Canada. It's approximately 14% of the workforce and I'm going to lead to the one-party state, they work for the government. So there's your first 34% of your vote base, okay? But once we get to 30% unemployment, here's what's going to happen. We can talk about jobs that'll stay. Your accountants and lawyers are not going to go away. You're still going to need people in the technical fields and engineering. But what will happen is the classical career will be dead. And the Luddites will declare war on AI and robotics. And finally, from the mountaintop, the great hope arrives. And the great hope is going to be, just as you mentioned, UBI. It's going to be the holy grail where apartheid, economic apartheid, meets the outcome of this great thing for egalitarianism. We're all going to be the same, of course, except for the aristocracy, and they'll be on their carbon-emitting jet planes, cars, and so forth. So once I get 40%, even 30% of the people, 40% hooked on UBI, okay, I've got a pretty good voting base. I keep them docile. They've already got their cell phones. They can't get their faces out of that all day. I'm around it all day long. So, pardon me, we've got people in a nice docile state, because once I feed them every month, we can now start introducing some of the other tenets of technological tyranny to add to it. But from the mountaintop, again, will come AI, and again, apartheid will meet egalitarianism, and then we can start getting into, we're going to finally get inclusion, equity, and diversity, where there's going to be a lot of people hooked on this stuff. And that's how you make them weak and docile. Because after all, Brian, we're in this earth for a while. We don't need any purpose. I can sit home in my 15-minute city. What do I need that for? That's that's heresy. In fact, let me tell you something. The concept of working will be equated with heresy, a form of enslavement, a subjugation for major corporations, but we're getting there.
I just don't get it. Like, from a tangible value standpoint, right? Like, and I know maybe it's just the way we're wired. Like, I get value personally out of creating value, if that makes sense. Like, I like being on a call for, like, a discovery call for a new business opportunity. And I love hearing the problems that somebody has, because then I get to think about ways that I can help them solve those problems. And when we finish the sales cycle, we agree to moving forward with the solution. And then you actually get the solution put into place. And to see the problems go away, it's just a very rewarding moment, because not just were you able to make the sale in terms of helping somebody see the problem they have and articulate the value that your solution brings to the table, but then to actually see it put into action and make a substantive difference, that's huge. But as we go away from this mentality, a lot of that value, that self-derived value, is going to go away. So when we start to look at, where are people going to find value, Joe? And I guess, we go back to this communist Marxist mentality of, well, at that point, everybody can do what they enjoy doing. I can go write poetry and write songs and, just sniff flowers. But where's the value? Where is the I guess the inherent connection in what you're doing, and then seeing that thing, whatever it may be, help others to turn into something more beyond just a self-serving, like, this makes me feel good?
That's a good, hard question. And when you see people like you want to create value, and there's a lot of industrious people as we speak right now. Of course there is. They're going to be, well, I'm going to kind of go through that, but the value you're going to start seeing is in the higher end positions. I'll give you an example of value. Instead of going through the racketeering of university, I'll give you an example. You could probably study things like algorithms, like I'm talking about a quick 8-9 month course on it. You could probably go to Google University for 1 year, take 2 or 3 of these, or maybe study social media marketing for about 8 months, intensive courses, instead of wasting time in university. So some of the, if I could have a replay, and I've been asked this before, I would have done those 3 things. I'd be involved in social media, higher end legals, higher end engineering. I'll give you another example. If you like technical things and you're the person who's repairing and updating the artificial intelligence industrial robots, it may be CNC machines, may it be the more advanced robots we see in the assembly lines, you're in a good position there. But if you're at the bottom there, it's going to be tough. So with what you're doing, the podcast, the all these new alternative creators that we see on YouTube and Rumble and so on and so forth, they're going to be fine. That's not going to be the issue. It's going to be at the lower end. And so government will have to keep them docile as a voter base. I don't mean that in a condescending way. This is being done. And don't forget, we can talk about Marxism, Leninism. We are going through right now a cultural revolution. And if you don't believe that, read the Cultural Revolution during the time of Mao. And that's a story on its own. So what I would say is the idea is to keep them docile, and government will grow further. Because remember, when you have large government, in essence, in any government that's large, it has a Marxist or at least a socialist or a collective ideology. And generally speaking, these governments, the people who gravitate them are some of the most toxic people in history, which we can go through Cromwell all the way to Mao to Lenin. We can go right on. So these revolutions don't work out too well, and that's the French. So as far as I'm concerned, sort of throw that all at you. As far as I'm concerned, you keep people on UBI. They become a good voter base for me. I'll give them free Netflix. I'll the neo-totalitarian state will save them from the burdens of freedom, right? And every 4 years you kind of let them, you put them on the sidewalk and go, look, you can vote now, tyrant number 1, tyrant 2, or who do you like more, Lucky Luciano or Al Capone? Take your choice. Who do you like more? More CIA or more FBI? Which one do you like? Do you want more IRS? Anyways, I had to throw that in. Did I call them names? I'm sorry. So you'll be very happy. You'll stay at home. We'll even throw in with UBI some free Netflix, so you can watch, Andre the Giant fighting, I don't know, Godzilla for the World Championship. We can do it all on animation. And people will be happier that way, because it seems that this whole concept of democracy and freedom, it's too much of a burden for most people. So I know what you're saying, I'm with you there, but that's my first feedback on that. And then you might be asking the question later is, where's this money going to come? The UBI.
How'd you know? Because to that question, right, not only are there going to be people who are not on board with this, but dare I say, there are people who are going to be actively against this, Joe, who I could see, especially just look at our libertarian, more freedom-oriented camp. There's going to be folks who will go out of their way to not just actively stand against this. They're going to build solutions, build systems that are going to try and destroy this. And with that, yes, the government's going to be trying to get their hard-earned money from the people who are actually working hard to earn it. So where's that, I guess, that schism going to really rear its ugly head in terms of the people who are trying to build something different versus the government trying to get their money from the actual hardworking taxpayer to then build this UBI type of utopia? Okay.
And I will answer your question, because you are right. There's going to be the industrious people, with your mindset, that will work and will be a base for, at some level, for government. And some of the occupations we talk about, I won't go into the weeds with. But your other base is going to be the emergence of course, government itself is a monopoly on tyranny. But you're going to have the introduction of trillion-dollar corporations. I'm not talking in valuations only. I'm talking about in revenue. And we're not there. I do not believe we have a trillion-dollar company yet. So we have these trillion-dollar companies. You can talk about the royalty in Silicon Valley. May it be Google, may it be, we can go on Google, Facebook, Meta, so on and so forth. But the whole gang in the Silicon Valley cabal there. And so you have these trillion-dollar corporations. I'm running for election because, as you know, I have I'm going to run. I'm going to be president, prime minister. I have a very cosmic view of things. So when I run for elections, I will point at those greedy trillion-dollar corporations, the ones that give me my seed money to run, right? That lobby me. And what I will do is tax them. And in exchange, they'll have monopoly profits to offset that. So that's how they're going to do this. So the question will become, what's going to happen to the smaller and medium-sized businesses? And a lot of them will get zapped, okay? Or let's say there's certain industries or certain line extensions, perhaps, that Google is not interested. It's just too small for them. And you can see, there's businesses in Procter and Gamble, Unilever, so on and so forth, where some of those brands are only producing $100 or $60 million a year. So you give it to some smaller business, they can handle that kind of stuff. And the ones that toe the line of the cabalotocracy, which we went through in the last show, that toe the line, occasionally when people go, it's large corporations running this country, but no. We'll extinguish that intellectual thought. What we'll do is occasionally someone who's reading off the script will be elevated to the higher ends of royalty. We'll just kind of show them and go, look how nice they're doing. And, if you kind of obey and read off the script, maybe your company will become a very large corporation. But you got to read off the script. Who isn't reading off the script right now is Mr. Elon Musk. So,
oh, yeah. Well, and really quick, Joe, I want to actually show exactly what you're referring to in an example we just heard come out from Sage Steele. Now, Sage Steele used to work at ESPN, and I think it was in 2022 or 2021, before she was let go by ESPN, she did an interview with Joe Biden. And she, I think it was on Stephen A. Smith's podcast just last week, articulated how not only was, when she had that interview with Joe Biden, not only did it have to be screened and approved by ESPN executives before she could even sit down with the president, but the president's administration made it abundantly clear to ESPN that these are certain questions you are allowed to ask. You are not allowed to deviate from these questions. And if you do, interview's over, interview's done. And she was like, what? Okay. Now, at the point, she was an employee of ESPN, and she went to work and she had to do what she was told by her bosses. But she articulated after the fact saying, yeah, that was one of the moments where I realized, oh, this isn't real. We are being told what to say, and I'm being allowed to say certain things within this Overton window, right? Here's my allowable opinion, only within this confines. And as soon as she started to get outside that box, and you see this across the board in media, whether it's her, Ben Swan, Lara Logan from CBS, all these folks who have left your traditional media entities. And then the flip side, folks like Keith Olbermann, whose brains have turned to mashed potatoes completely. You see this split. There are folks who are saying no, because this is what's happening. And then there are folks on the other side who are saying, I want more of this. And we talked about this earlier. It's going to be usually the folks who are much more, I guess, in line with whatever argument or narrative is being promoted by the government. So, Joe, I say all that to say this sounds like we're at a crossroads. Where do we go? What options do we have on the table to build futures beyond what path we're currently on, this UBI, technocratic, one-size-fits-all cabalotocracy? How can we start to maybe build some different solutions? And heck, let's leverage some of the tools like AI to help build these different societies, when we know that our opponents are also going to be using those tools. So how can we use that to help us maybe have some equal footing, but also putting people in a spot that they can be successful, have freedom, have liberty, and still have those incentive structures in place?
I think what you described there, Brian, is the neo-totalitarian state, right? We're in the West, a soft totalitarian state. We're unlike perhaps China, which is a little bit of a harder totalitarian state. So what can you do? I think of free thinkers, and I know you've maybe heard this, go back to our communities. Go back to keeping our minds clear, in the sense that once your mind's liberated and you understand the toxicity of central government, I think that we can perhaps at best become a nationhood of communities that respects other communities. I think and I hate to say that, the concept, I was mentioning this to my wife earlier yesterday, the concept of nationhood, where there's such disparity of thinking, and understandably so, I'm wondering if this was an experiment gone bad as we currently know it, because there's very little in common with, let's say, one person from one state and one person from California. And that's fine. I'm not going to say nothing there. But I think we have to work as entrepreneurs. We have to create inventions, products, ways of doing business that fits under the radar of all these multiple trillion-dollar corporations because they are joined at the hip with government, right? And so we're going to have to, what can I say, rope-a-dope. I think that's the best word. That gives away my age. I think we're going to have to rope-a-dope, catch our breath, and go into areas that these corporations are too large and sluggish to get into as entrepreneurs. Bring our skill sets up. Stop sending our children to scam universities, and most of them are scams for the most part. You take a course, you know what I'm getting at. You might be taking a course in business, maybe social media, and then they fill in about 4 or 5 basket weaving courses in there, and you're paying thousands of bucks for that. I used to teach. I don't want to get off base. You have faculties in universities. I'll give you one for social studies, so on and so forth. You're not going to get a job there. They know they're not, but they protect their department like a mafioso. That's what they do. So what I don't know if I answered your question thoroughly, but you're going to see it from the grassroots up right now. And I'm going to lose this thought. So I will tell you, you've described to me, in my opinion, Brian, the perfect chasm, the gap between the political class and the plebeians. They are not interested in what we have to say. They're not interested because they're compromised with combination of corporations. The intelligence agencies are sometimes not that intelligent. Some of their coup d'etats don't work out too good. Some do, though. But there's that chasm there. And when the political class completely ignores its subjects, the citizenry of the country, that chasm will start getting into, you'll have you'll have a very shaky environment. And that happened exactly when that happens, people will do one of two things, okay? They'll finally turn around and go to someone who's charismatic and is going to create a great hope for them, or they're going to turn around and vote for a tyrant, right? Yep. One or the other. Someone's got to come in there. We're going to clean up Washington. No way. If you brought Marcus Aurelius out the second coming of the Messiah and went to Washington, they'd eat him alive. The place is a corrupt cesspool, not just Washington, London, same idea in Ottawa, all the Western capitals, who are countries that are preaching democracy and freedom. I think they need to look in the mirror very carefully because they're clueless, okay? And nobody's looking up to us anymore to lead that way. So, that kind of gets out of the sphere. But I think you can kind of see that. But in Cromwell in the British Civil War, he turned into a dictator. When King Louis XVI was overthrown, we got Robespierre, and then of course Napoleon, and it got really toxic there. So these revolutions aren't too good either. So again, I like the community life better. If we're an amalgamation of communities with respect to each other within a country, if you will, we're okay there. People are messed up, Brian. Oh, I'm a Democrat. I'm a Republican. It's basically two sides of the same arse, isn't it?
You're spot on. It is, in fact, two sides of the same arse. And some may even say that might be why one of the logos for rid of the top two parties is a donkey. But that maybe is a little mean. No, it's not. It's accurate. But really quick, Joe, I just want to go back to something you raised up here as we're going towards the end of the episode. And that is the idea of grassroots, right? And I'm actually hearing an opportunity here. And I want to articulate my thoughts, and I want to hear what you think of my kind of solution. So Larry Sharp, he's been on the show a couple of times. He hails from New York State, and Larry talks about coalition building. And I agree. From a political standpoint, in order to actually get your cause to move forward, it's going to be tough to have your niche cause make it somewhere on its own, because traditionally the niche cause has a niche audience of people who care about it. So in order to help raise awareness for that specific cause, usually you'll see these niche causes coalesce together and form some type of organized movement, right? To help raise a collective awareness of their issue. Now, you hear these words, collective, unionize, mobilize, all that stuff. And it sounds very progressive, left-leaning in the terminology. And yet what we actually see is that in order for these core niche movements that, let's just say, are in this idea of freedom, of liberty, of personal value, and bringing value to the table outside of this this cabalotocracy, this corporatocracy, let's really work together, build some coalitions with people in like-minded approaches, and build something different in the grassroots. And from a political standpoint, look no further than what we've seen over the past 10, 20 years. It worked here in the United States. The Tea Party movement, you had Occupy Wall Street back with, heck, whether you supported it or didn't support it. You had the Hands Up, Don't Shoot movement, Black Lives Matter movement from 2015 through 2020. You had the folks who stood up and said no to the insane vaccine mandates and the insane COVID regulations. There was a coalescing of different movements across political ideologies during all of those different examples. And they had success, both politically as well as societally. So I say all that, Joe, do you see that there might be an opportunity for us in this grassroots world to work together, to build different solutions and, frankly, better solutions versus the one-size-fits-all corporate solutions we see or government solutions we see being force-fed down the throats of your average citizen? Do you think that maybe us doing it better will inevitably lead to more and more folks saying, I don't want this one-size-fits-all government approach. I actually do support freedom, even though maybe I personally didn't think about it in a freedom sense or a political sense, but now I'm seeing the direct impact of policy, or rather not having good policy, and it's changing my mind without me having to even think about the ism behind the actual policy or the position. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. What you're saying is very intellectual, but it's very clear to me. It's very clear what you're saying.
Whew.
The question is,
by the way, that was the smoke you saw coming out of my ears. That was the intellectual part of my brain trying to fire up. So
no, you're doing good. Oh no, that's okay. I told you earlier, I drank 4 jugs of coffee to catch up with you. Third time on your lovely show, I got to drink enough coffee. But again, earlier I made a comment about the burdens of freedom, but basically human history, look, free markets are not perfect. Large government and freedom can't coexist. Democracy is a separate concept than freedom. The two are not correlated, right? This is my view, and we'll get there. But there's really 3 stages of human history that we've gone through. We've gone through freedom and disorder, tyranny and disorder, and tyranny and order. The American experiment originally was freedom and order, and that's what's gone bad. It has not worked. It's worked in stages, but certainly not since Woodrow Wilson. Well, maybe President Harding, but certainly not during and after the Great Depression. It's game over there. We had government meddling. So people need to say, okay, they got to come up for air. I mean, Brian, have you ever talked to people that actually watch television? I haven't watched television since, the Michael Jackson Thriller album came out. I don't know.
It's all streaming, Joe. It's Netflix, it's Hulu, it's YouTube. It named the streaming service of choice.
Have you heard people who watch TV, how they speak? They mimic these CNN, ABC, Ministry of Pravda propagandists. Even in the I've studied Soviet history. Even in the Soviet Union, during the time of Pravda, during the Soviet Union time, they had more shame than what we have in the Western media. And you don't get mad at the reporters. They're just hop-along Cassidys, okay? They're just getting paid to tell a story, and they're compromised. So you have to either splash people with cold water, do some of the things you do on a community basis, and let's ask ourselves, what is freedom? And what can freedom produce? Can it produce a great industrial society that can build and produce? Or are we going to sit there and flip options? Or we're going to be a rentier society or a finance society that doesn't produce anything? And that's what all that is all about. That's why we're on China, because they're an industrial society and we become a rentier society. We buy, sell, rent, whatever, but we're not actually producing anything. So again, we need to get people addicted to freedom I'm going to use the word addicted, as opposed to the toxic addiction of large government.
Love it. All right. There's our call to action for today, and that is to help get people addicted to freedom. I'm on board. I think the audience is on board as well, Joe. So thank you for articulating today. Yes, the very real consequences of AI, both good and bad, and how we need to be really paying attention to this from a grassroots perspective. A lot there in our episode to unpack. So folks, this is absolutely one of those episodes. Hit that heart button, like keep it in the archives, listen to it every now and then. And I'm curious too, like if you listen to this episode, I was going to say 2 years, give it 2 months in the future. I want to see where things are going to be heading as well. So go ahead, give this episode some love, and also give it a share when you do. Please tag yours truly at B Nichols Liberty. Joe, where can folks go ahead and reach out to you if they want to continue the conversation?
Well, I'm on Twitter. If you look up my name or Practical MBA, I have my YouTube channel. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So I'm very, very easily accessible. Of course, any one of those three social media mediums, I'm around. Yeah. And I've got my book, The Practical MBA in Economics. And I hope sometime in June, midsummer, I'm bringing out my new book called The Guerrilla Guide for Entrepreneurs. And
love it.
Finishing touches on that. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
There you go. And that is exactly the type of solution we need for when we're talking about grassroots entrepreneurs are, if anything, they are the market solution for grassroots organization. And that is, you have an idea, you think that there is a demand for this idea, specifically if it solves a particular problem. Let's test it. Let's bring it to the market. And that is exactly what we need more of. So we'll have to keep an eye on that book when it comes out, Joe, and obviously have you back on the show. And really excited, by the way, to have you as a part of the Brian Nichols Show, recurring guests. I know the audience always gets a lot of value out of our conversations. Heck, I get a lot of value out of our conversations. So I'm really looking forward to you, doing some more stuff here for the show. And I know the audiences as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on your show, Brian. And I wish you and all the audience all the best.
Awesome. Well, folks, there's our episode for today. So if you got some value beyond going ahead and giving it a share, please go ahead and subscribe to the show. You can follow us on your favorite video or podcast platform, YouTube, Rumble, Sovereign, Facebook, X.com, podcast, YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is you consume your content. Just do me a favor. Number one, hit that subscribe button. Number two, hit the like button, because that actually helps our channel more than you would know. If you want to go ahead and leave a question, or heck, if you got some stuff to say, head down below in the comments. Let us know your thoughts. And then one final thing, and that is, if you are in fact listening to us on the podcast version, hit download all unplayed episodes. And the reason being, not only has Joe been on the show a couple times here, but we have over 830 episodes of the Brian Nichols Show dating way back to January of 2018. So we've had some phenomenal guests here on the show from the world of economics, business, you really name it, finance, AI, technology, blockchain. We have had just a plethora of guests who I guarantee, if you go through the archives, a few of those conversations should leave you educated, enlightened, and informed. And one final ask, and that is to folks, please support the folks who support us. And that is our amazing sponsors. So we have some really phenomenal sponsors out there, like Cardio Miracle, like The Wellness Company, like Indie Emporium, and their brand new Michael Scott 2024 shirt. So please go ahead and give them some love, because heck, they're the ones who give us some love. Otherwise, that's all we had for you today. Brian Nichols signing off here on the Brian Nichols Show for Joe Gulesserian. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.